violations?
Demerits.
Like I have an orange card I give people?
When somebody talks over 3 minutes, you have to flash the card, but we're not that bored. That doesn't apply for us.
And if you start holding it up as soon as I talk, then I know.
But I just don't want to hear you. Yeah.
We won't be doing that here.
That's it.
We ready to begin?
We're on.
Yep.
Ready?
Ready.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. Lower Saucon Township Planning Commission, September 26, 2024. And we'll call to order. Roll call. Craig is not here, so Chris. I am Chris Nagy. I am here. And Jennifer.
Here.
We have Jeffrey. Schmel is not here. Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Veronica.
Here.
Rob. Did I get that right?
He said he was coming. And I just wanted to let everybody know that Jeff has resigned.
Has he? Okay. We have 4 members.
So we have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
Since
We're
we have
good to
7
go.
people total, 4 are here, we have a quorum, so we can proceed.
All right. So we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So now we open for public comment. We don't have anything on the list. Nothing signed in. All right, so we'll move to the business items. We can begin with the Devco LLC conditional use.
Good evening, Greg Adelman here on behalf of the applicant. We're here this evening to go over conditional use application for proposed billboard, or as your ordinance calls it, an outdoor advertising device on the fire and rescue property, which is technically located at 3621 Old Philadelphia Pike. The site plan has been put up on the screen. If we could go to the aerial first, actually, I'm sorry. And just orient everyone, I'm sure you're familiar with it. You've either been there or driven through or passed occasions. The aerial that was put up shows the overview with 378 to your right and Philadelphia Pike to the rear. The fire rescue property is approximately 4.8 acres in total area, located in the GB General Business Zoning District. The use is permitted under your ordinance by conditional use. We also had sought some variances, as you may have seen in Brian's review letter. We had those variances approved by the Zoning Hearing Board on Monday. So at this time, what we've proposed is, we believe, a compliant plan with the variances having been granted. The red arrow that is on the aerial is the general location of where the proposed billboard would be sited. If we could go to the next slide. Or not the next slide, the next page of this slide. No, back to the arrow. I'm sorry, there's multiple. I just wanted to show everybody. So street view wise, you can see that, which direction is this coming in? This is northbound face. You can see where it's supposed to be generally located on the site. The next, if we go down the next page, yep, there should be like 5. See it coming in from southbound, you see the speedway to your right. Generally, that's where it's located. That would have been located where, if it had complied with the 25-foot setback, it would have been pushed back, but that gives you a general location. If we keep going, that where you see the arrow and the gentleman holding the yellow pole would have been where the setback at 25 feet. We got it approved with the variance to move it up to the front of the property by about 5 feet off the right of way. So it's just giving you a general approximation. It's going on the little bit of raised grassy area That's, I believe, where the fire rescue's sand mound used to be before it was connected to public sewer. Now, if we could go to the site plan. The proposed billboard is a double-sided digital billboard. It's 23 feet in height. Total sign area is 300 square feet. It's what we call a V configuration. If you look at the top of the screen, I got a pointer, sorry. If you look at the top of the screen, in this location, you can see both sides, and it has a certain angled spread. That's why we call it a V configuration.
Is that square footage the one side?
No, it's 300 for each side, that's
Each
correct.
side, yeah. Okay.
Right, so that's what your ordinance permits for each sign face area. The pole is located in the center of the two signs, so it's what we call a center mount. And on the site, just to orient you again, this is 378. This is Old Philadelphia Pike. The sign is located right here in this location with the V configuration going that way, so you can see the sign facing this way and this way. And as you saw from the street view photos, there's a lot of signage and other things, obstructions along the 378 corridor. You've got overhead wires, you've got multiple on-premises signs. There are also off-premises signs about 892 feet from this one, and then another one just a little further down. Those are all digital billboards on this corridor. So you already have existing signs within the very close vicinity of the property. Overall, the property itself has some natural resources, and Brian brought this up in his review letter. There's a large amount of floodplain on the property, which is what I'm highlighting now. It's in this black line area. There's also wetlands. There's, I believe, the Black River that comes in somewhere down here on the site. A little hard to see as well. So overall, the reason this area was selected was because it's outside of the floodplain. That floodplain is delineated by FEMA. This area is, since it was, I guess, the raised sand mound, it's actually above the base flood elevation, so it's not included. So we wanted to put the pole in an area that's not flood prone. It also provides us with the ability to have visual, I guess you call it a cone of vision for the drivers who are headed, is that southbound? Southbound on 378, and without having to take down, there's some very large mature trees here, 2 or 3 of them, which are not going to be touched. They'll be preserved and not cleared. So all in all, this was the optimal location for us to be able to put the sign. Also having it closer to the roadway, whereas your ordinance originally required it back somewhere in this area, which is much harder to see. Obviously, it's fully obstructed. So overall, we believe this is a optimal location. It's easy to be seen by drivers while they're driving without having to distract them or take their eyes too far off the road, left or the right. It's really right in their cone of vision, just like the other boards may be in the other locations along this corridor. What else did I have? We received Brian's review back in August. We haven't responded yet because we were waiting to see if we were going to get the variances from the zoning hearing board, which we did on Monday. So we're in the process of preparing a response and putting the additional details on the plan. I'm happy to go through it item by item if the planning commission would like, or if you want to ask some questions before we get into any of the technical details, we're happy to answer them at this point. Whatever your pleasure is.
Is the target audience the drivers on 378 or
Yes,
78?
378, so it's only
Okay.
about 23 feet high, and it's directed, this face directs to that bound traffic, this face directs to that. That's the cross read, as we call it. So if cars are traveling northbound, they're going to see that face.
For that height, how does that compare to there's 2 other digital billboards right there?
I think it's comparable. To give you, for instance, the Speedway sign up in this location is a comparable height. I think that's a little over 20 feet high. This is 23 feet high. So it's similar. It's not I mean, the reason we did it, if you went back to one of the street view pictures, you'll see most of the signs are, like 10 feet high. And then you have the pole and the wires, which are probably about 25 to 30 feet high. So we had to find the middle location to stick the sign so that it's viewable. And we also had to make sure it was above the maximum height of a vehicle on the road, which is 13 feet 6 inches, which is trucks. So you have all of those different obstructions, the roadway obstructions, and then plus the wires hanging down from the overhead. So we're right in that sweet spot between the top of the on-premises signs and the bottom of the electric lines.
And you said the vegetation in the area, you don't need to touch any.
We're not touching, that's correct. Yeah, by moving it forward to the front, we're able to avoid any of the obstructions from any of the natural vegetation on the southbound direction, somebody going southbound. So we're able to keep those mature trees in the location where they are, don't have to trim them. I mean, we'll be right up front here, so.
With the existing signs, are you closer to the road than the others, or about the same distance?
I believe we're closer than at least the closest one. So the closest one's actually pushed back up, but it has a different topography and it doesn't have all the obstructions. If you recall, the area where it's located doesn't have as many on-premises signs along that area. It's also on an embankment a little bit, so it's a little bit higher up. So their pole is actually lower, but road elevation-wise, it's probably about the same from your view shed. It's pushed back a little bit because there's nothing in the front of the site to block it. So if we obviously had a clear site, we probably would have kept the sign back further, but because we didn't, the only way to see it is by moving it up.
Is the base of the sign going to be, and I apologize if you covered this before I arrived late.
No, not at all.
Is the base of the sign going to be one pole?
Yes, it's a monopole structure. Up here it gives you some more details. In the center and the right details, you'll see that it's a monopole structure, a subsurface foundation. It'll have to be structurally designed and engineered for a wind-loaded structure in accordance with the applicable building codes, which is what we normally do. We'll have to do some borings in the location to find out what that immediate substrate is, and that was one of the comments about it being a potential carbonate geology area, which we're aware of. So when we do it, we'll have to make sure that the foundation is stable beneath where we're putting in the pole.
So I understand why you are bringing it closer to the road.
Right.
How far away from the edge of the road is it going to be? Like, if you can tell us.
Actual edge of paving.
Wide.
The pole.
Yeah, the
pole, that's
pole
what I mean.
itself, I don't know if we have that dimension from the edge of the cartway.
Well,
This is Tim Earl, by the way.
the sign face width is 25 feet, and it would be located in the center, so at least 12 and a half feet from the front edge, and then I think the front edge itself is probably another 15 feet from the edge of the cartway.
Yeah, I guess my question was, if a car leaves the roadway, how far would the car have to travel to impact the pole?
About 20 to 25 feet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so that's,
It's also slightly elevated on a.
that is correct, on a
There's-
mound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we measured the setback, we're measuring the setback, if you look from this closest edge to the roadway, it's this to 5 feet. That's of course elevated up, and then the pole's another, what'd you say, it was 5 or 10 feet?
Yeah, 12 feet probably.
12 feet
Yeah.
to the middle, so.
okay,
So yeah, it would take somebody really,
yeah,
exactly,
I got it.
veering off the road at a high rate of speed and then flying up the embankment. And then they'd have to hit the pole, which is,
Just right.
pole. So.
Don't underestimate.
I know. But on the fire and rescue, you would hope somebody would be there to help them before it happens. I don't know if you have any other questions. I can go through the review comments if.
Before we do that, I'm sorry if I cut somebody else off.
Yeah, sure.
Would you mind, I know you identified yourself, I'm not sure if the individual to your right did.
Tim Earl, I'm the applicant.
He's one of the principals with the applicant.
The other question I had is with it's an illuminated digital sign. I don't know of any houses or anything in the area that they're gonna get some, light noise.
Right.
You looked at that, I assume?
Yeah, and your ordinance has requirements with respect to the maximum illumination measured in nits So it has a total amount that you can have in terms of intensity. That's what you measure in nits. And then it has a requirement, a maximum for the amount of foot candles and what we call glare coming off the sign. I believe it's 0.3 foot candles that comes off of the sign. So there are requirements to minimize the amount of glare or spread that comes after it. Also, at nighttime, the maximum amount of nits, which is daytime, I think is 5,000, drops to, I believe, 250 after 10 p.m. So, and that's standard. When you think about it, during the day, the LEDs are generating more power in order to be seen at a normal level above ambient light. So you have an ambient light sensor inside the billboard that actually checks that and then says, all right, I'm going to charge it up more so you can see it. I'm going to charge it up less. If it's really dark and cloudy, it'll be less. If it's bright and sunny, it'll be more. But you won't be able to see the difference because it's regulated to the certain amount of foot candles that it can generate. So all of that has to be in compliance per your ordinance. And then it doesn't emit any noise. It doesn't emit any, I think pyrotechnics was my favorite. The ordinance says it can't shoot fireworks out of it, which it doesn't. You also have, you also have regulations on what we call the actual screen changing. It's got to be an instantaneous change. It can't be moving, flashing, or some type of distracting type
Like a strobe.
copy.
Right.
It has to be solid copy that's static, that either instantaneously changes or comes in and comes out.
Okay.
And that's something that PennDOT also regulates too. The sign's on a state highway, so it's got to comply with PennDOT's regulations as well. Once it gets a permit from the township, it has to get a permit from PennDOT as well. So they have their own regulations. I think this ordinance permits sign copy changes once every 6 seconds. PennDOT actually permits once every 5 seconds, so your ordinance is a little bit more stringent, not much, but still a little more stringent. So, and that, from a advertiser standpoint, is about right. They usually like between 6 and 8 seconds, because if you think about the driver at a driver's speed passing, a sign, they want to be able to see the copy and then flip it when that person drives by, then the next person can actually see it, process it, digest it, and understand what's being advertised without having to, take their eye off the road. It's all supposed to be done within your frame of reference, your cone of vision, while you're driving. So
I know I see there's a lot of wetlands there. Does this site allow for future growth in any capacity?
I'm not sure. It's very restricted in terms of the floodplain and the wetlands. We didn't put survey on the back end of the plan. I'm not sure exactly what's back there.
There's a building there, yeah.
I mean, there's a building, but I don't know if it has any future development potential.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's highly constrained because of the floodplain that
But
comes
nothing
in.
more in the front?
What's that?
Anything allowable in the front?
I don't know. I mean, we haven't looked at it, and obviously I don't know what fire rescue has looked at. I think you'd have to be dealing with some stormwater management improvements and then basically redelineate the floodplain in order to be able to do it. Your ordinance doesn't permit structures in the floodplain area. I believe that's a prohibition. So that's not to say the floodplain couldn't change by virtue of doing additional stormwater management. So I couldn't say never. In its current condition, it's very difficult, I would think. And one of the neighbors, I think who owns this property over here, showed up at the zoning hearing board, and that was his complaint as well. He had tried to do some additional development and had met stiff resistance because of the floodplain area. Also explains why we chose the area not in the floodplain to put the pole in.
It looks like, I think he's in the actual floodway, so.
Oh, he's in the floodway of
Yeah, it's
the river.
building right there, yeah.
Oh, right
so,
down here.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where are all the residences that are closest to this?
They're on the other side, up this way, back.
Yeah, the west side of
Yeah.
the old Philadelphia Pike.
Yeah.
Right. So they're all the way up here. They wouldn't be looking at the signs being directed this way and this way. They might be able to, if they're at a high enough elevation, Jennifer, to be able to see the back of the sign. I'm not sure what the area is to the rear here in terms of vegetation, but they wouldn't see any of the light or glare spread.
It's a wedge and it's facing away
Yeah,
from those houses.
you would see the inactive area of the sign. You'd see a pole and maybe the back of the sign at the most. All glare light is all directed towards the roadway and the immediate area right around the sign. And that was one of the other comments was to show what the area around the sign would look like in terms of photometrics. But there'd be no spread to the rear of the property. This sign area back here, it remains dark, and if you think about it, it kind of would come off on an angle like that. These signs, they're not the old billboards that have the floodlights that come in to shine on the sign and then bounce off and reflect in all different directions. They're the diodes that have the components, and each one of them has a shield to it, just like a cutoff shield for regular lights. These have it too, so that when you're looking at the board from a certain angle as you rotate away, you'll see that there's light, but you won't even see the copy. Think about those 4D televisions that you have now that have kind of like the round. If you're standing all the way on the left side of the room, you can see it's lit, but you can't see anything. Very similar type of mechanism here. So it really is going to be self-contained into the commercial corridor along 378.
The site is between Seawyco and Blair?
Yeah, Blair's a
That kinda-
little
right?
further down, right? Blair's office is a little further down.
Right in
What's
front of
that structure right there?
This one right here?
Yes.
It's auto repair.
Right.
Out of repair? Okay, I'm trying to,
The barn property, right.
okay,
So, and then the fire rescue sign, I think, is like
it's up there.
right here, that's, so you come in this way.
So this would not be visible from 78. The top height of this is what, 25 feet?
23.
23?
Yeah, no, I doubt it.
78 is much.
Much higher. And, you also, I think you've got some existing built environment on the other side of 78 as well. I mean, you're really not talking about a very tall structure here. At most, it's a story and a half, maybe max 2 stories if you think about 23 feet, 10 or 12 foot each
It's really
story.
similar to the 2 digital signs that are right.
That's correct. That's correct. In fact, they're bigger in size, I believe.
Maybe slightly bigger, yeah, and they sit up on the
Yeah.
hill there, so the relative elevation is probably about the same,
I mean,
not a little higher.
I just drove in again this evening before I came to the meeting. Both of them require you to do this
Yeah,
when you're driving.
one's like almost is back in
Yeah,
the
that's
trees
right.
back.
That's
yeah.
exactly right. And
Yeah.
whereas this one, you probably won't even have to move your head. You just move your eyes for 2 seconds,
Okay.
and you'll see it. So.
Did you want to go over you said you didn't get a chance to respond to
Yeah.
Brian's stuff. If you want to go over those, is that good, Brian?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. We could just run through it very quickly. It's not too long.
There's not that many, and you've actually touched on
Some
most of them.
Yeah, and in advance, that's what I was doing. I was looking at it saying, all right, what do we need to really talk about? If you want me to just jump to the ones that, have some more discussion, we'd probably go to, well, that's a good question. What is there?
We talked about the carbonate area that will be
Right.
investigated through geotech study.
Oh, here's what I wanted to talk about. Number 2, the natural resource protection standards. We've shown on the plan the floodplain. We've shown on wetlands the floodway. There's no woodlands on the property. There's just a couple of trees. We checked for the floodplain soils, and this is not a floodplain soil, but we'll add that detail to the plan. We haven't done the geotech yet, because if we had the geotech, I would have just said, we'll give you the geotech around the sign, because that's all we're doing. But since we haven't yet, it is in the carbonate geology overlay. We can label that. But we would expect that we'd have to give you the geotech study so that when you would review it, you'd know that whatever our substrat is, we're addressing it appropriately to make sure that the sign pole is structurally stable. So.
There's 2 things to address. The carbonate geology study, there's requirements in the ordinance that you have to do. So, and then the structural part of the sign, although I won't review that, you've got to get a building permit.
Correct.
That'll be reviewed
Correct.
at that time.
Correct. So we'll definitely be doing that and updating the plans to at least show that it's in the carbonate geology area. When we went
The
through,
natural resource protection, the ordinance has a chart in there that you need to put on the plans.
oh, you want us to add the actual standards list of what the percentages are?
Right, and like you said, no woodlands, so your area is 0.
0. That's
So-
right. All right, we'll add the chart. That's fine. So we can quantify it. And I think that's also because there's one of the areas riparian buffer. So the riparian buffer we measured from the Black River, we're 101 feet away from the stream. So we're outside of the buffer. I know your ordinance protects 85%. So we wouldn't be really disturbing it even if we were in that section, but we would also add, because I think one of your other comments was to show the limit of disturbance. I mean, it's basically going to be a circle around the sign area, and that's it.
But how are you gonna get to it?
That's the last comment. Right.
That ties into some of those other.
Right, so, and Tim, we have to talk about that. We were gonna designate, PennDOT will allow us off of 378 to access the sign?
Well, from a maintenance standpoint, yeah, the maintenance is very limited, maybe once every couple months to replace kind of a single part of the sign. You would just park, have a pickup truck vehicle park in the existing parking
For
lot.
construction, my guess is we're coming in off the main driveway.
Yeah.
And then coming up, because PennDOT doesn't allow us to stage on 378. So what we'll do is designate a little construction area on the plan so that you have it to talk about it, and locate it. It'll be a minimal disturbance coming in, so because we're not allowed to block off 378 to put the pole in. PennDOT won't allow us to do that. So that was your last comment, number 13. 12 was provide a narrative. Well, most of that section doesn't apply. The only two items under the list as C2O of that section that would really apply is describe the proposed use and the hours of the use, and it's a billboard, and it'd be 24 hours. So I don't know if you really need a narrative. The rest of the stuff dealt with like what chemicals you may have, and there's a whole other like 5 or 6 different facts. None of them apply. It was like number of employees generated.
Well, yeah, in your response, assuming you're gonna write a letter, just put that, the ones that aren't applicable.
That's what we'll do. I just didn't want the planning commission to think that we were missing some long narrative here. It's probably the most simple use to explain out of the permitted ones. Other than that, the color and illumination of the proposed outdoor hours, it's going to be what do you use? A black matted?
Yeah.
There'll be a black matted, black coated paint on the structure.
When you come to council for your hearing, are you gonna have a color illustration of what the sign will look like?
Say like a photo rendering or something like that?
We could put something together.
Because they may ask.
Yeah.
So it might be good to have that to show.
We could drop that in and make it to scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a problem. And other than that, the rest of the letter was the variances, which we got, having to get a building permit, PennDOT permit, and then that was it, I think.
Okay.
So just to conclude, with regard to the Hanover engineering letter, you're willing to either comply with everything or you have complied?
Yeah, we're gonna comply with everything. We're gonna resubmit and add the details to the plan. That way we won't have any more comments. If Brian were to review it later, he'd say building permit, PennDOT permit.
Are you gonna do that before you ask to be on the council to have the hearing?
Yeah, we're scheduled for October 9th, so we're gonna try to get it in right away so that you can review it quickly and then issue either a new letter or at the hearing if you wanted to say they've addressed.
Okay.
Go from there.
And then for the edification of the members of Planning Commission, I had provided you with a memo just to go over what a conditional use was, because I know some of you are new and some of you have heard this many times before. Just as a matter of background, if it's a conditional use, it's essentially a permitted use with conditions. So if one, and I'm not suggesting anybody is doing this, but if one said, I don't like this use, you can't deny it based on that reason. It's already, in essence, permitted. And the question is, what conditions can you impose on it, or do you choose to impose on it? And then normally when you're dealing with something that has more, you're dealing with a subdivision or a particular commercial building or so on, there's the conditions that the engineer might suggest, and then there's the conditions that, as a planning commission, you might suggest. And it's certainly up to you to add or change or modify any conditions, but generally you look to the engineer for these types of things because of this somewhat, I don't want to call it unique nature, but distinct nature of this particular use compared to a bunch of other things. I just wanted to point that out.
There was one other piece of information I forgot to mention, which is required in your ordinance, but we're also willing to do in council. When they reviewed the zoning applications, also wanted to make sure that it was a condition of any potential approval was that the sign would permit the emergency messaging services that Amber Alert permits, that's, you know, missing or wanted, missing children or wanted criminals. Also, we're willing to provide space for community events and community messaging as well. There's plenty of time that we can make available so that if there's certain events, whether it's sporting events, flea markets, concerts in the park, etc., to be able to allow those to be advertised on the sign as well, free of charge to the municipality or your municipal organizations.
Your method of structure, it's just going to be boring. So like 12 inches round or whatever it is,
Right.
and how deep it needs to go, and you're going to concrete a structure. Okay.
That's right. It'll be a concrete encased foundation based upon the depth of the loaded structure above, and then what's the substrata like underneath. The carbonate geology is necessary because if obviously it's limestone up top, when you hit, you want to get down further to bedrock. So it could be a deeper foundation than normal depending upon what we find underneath.
So it's like a boring for a well or something like that.
Very similar, except we're trying to find something to put it into, usually some type of bedrock. So.
All right, do we have any other questions on the board, the public?
Are there conditions that they put upon you yet? Are there any
So
conditional?
That's what we need to determine.
yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you might want to consider when the appropriate time comes is if someone's willing to make a motion, you might want to consider making a motion recommending the conditional use, subject to meeting all the conditions set forth in the Hanover engineering letter, subject to the representations that they made with regard to the emergency services and community services and so on. And you can choose to, if you feel it appropriate, to add other conditions, if you so chose.
Do we have any other comments before that? Any questions? Are we ready? Do we have a motion? You can just go ahead.
I motion to approve it.
Based off of
Subject to the conditions of the engineer's report.
And do we want?
Representations also, right?
What was it? Good.
No,
Go ahead.
well, I think one person should make a motion, right?
Yes.
But subject to the, also subject to the representations the gentleman made during the hearing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have a motion, and are there any other conditions that we want to add to it? Your motion is without any additional
Other
conditions?
than, allowing the township, Amber Alerts, the emergency services, winter weather advisory, any weather advisory.
Do we have any definition around that? Typically, we just make it any type of community or emergency messaging,
Okay.
and then we leave it open. Whatever the township would like or the emergency services need, we make available. But we also allow the community, and that can come through the township. Typically, they don't contact us directly. It'd be something that if it's a township community event, then that could also be advertised.
Sorry, I did just think of a question. As far as the type of advertisements that are going to go on this billboard, is the department contracting with some sort of advertising agency that's going to solicit advertisements, or are the businesses going to contact the department directly, or how is that going to work? I guess my concern is, maybe the township might feel differently if it was an advertisement for a car dealership versus an advertisement for a different type of business that might be less family friendly.
We don't do any adult oriented or type of offensive advertising. Clearly, what normally happens is there's usually a national, semi-regional, and then local advertising component to every sign. You have national packages depending upon who owns and operates the sign. They would subscribe to your Coca-Colas and your Pepsis. Then you'd have your semi-regional where if somebody's a multi-area car dealer, they may do a package or someone. And then you have your local business who might want to advertise. So that's what you see, but we don't do anything that's offensive or other than maybe someone wanting to do political speech of advertising for a campaign and you may be offended by the candidate. However, that's free speech, so that you'll see on these signs. wherever you are. Outside of that, you won't see strip clubs or anything like that being advertised.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I understand. It's not the airport down in Philadelphia where when you drive down, what is that, Passyunk?
I was thinking about drives I've taken out west where
Also
think some billboards.
Think about the fact that the advertisers who want to be on the sign don't want to be on a sign with that type of advertisement. So you lose all of those advertisers who want to, try to reach the public. They're not going to do it when the next advertisement is like Club Risque or something. They're not going to go on. So the board will lose its value if you were to do that.
So where we are, if I may, is a motion's been made, and just to clarify what the motion is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the motion is to recommend the conditional approval, subject to the applicant meeting all the conditions set forth in the Hanover Engineering Letter dated August 16, 2024, and subject to the applicant following through with the representations made at today's meeting, which include providing access for public service announcements, community announcements, police and safety announcements. So that's, did I say
That's
that
the
correctly?
motion?
So we have a motion.
Do we have-
a second?
Can I
go ahead.
can I suggest to the group, would we like, as far as the sign, I personally have no issue with it. Would we like to add a condition about the content as far as being family friendly? I don't know that we need to do that.
I mean, if we did that, we'd have to define that.
Yeah, no, I think it might be more trouble than it's worth then. Think about the
I mean, we
first
can,
one as well.
you're gonna have to either trust the business ethics, or
I think that's
if
right.
we wanted to put that condition down, then we have to just define what that is, what would be offensive.
And then enforcement becomes very difficult.
No,
Yeah.
That's a good idea,
I
but
agree.
yeah,
I agree.
the more we talk about it, I think
Yeah,
your thought and your heart's in the right place, but it might be more than it's worth, more trouble than it's worth.
sure.
Okay, so I have the motion, all in favor?
We need a second, actually. to do
Second.
Oh,
this.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Second?
I'll second it.
Second, okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Nope, so,
Thank
motion
you.
approved.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next.
No, it's a great idea, but yeah.
Just finished the First Amendment trial in Allentown.
Next on the list is the minutes from last meeting, which was all the way in May 23rd. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None, so we move forward. Minutes have been approved. Now we're open for public comment on non-agenda items.
I just wanted to bring to the Planning Commission's attention that there are some Lehigh Valley Planning Commission trainings, and I think Molly had emailed that to everybody. So if you are able to attend, that would be wonderful. I know I'm going to try to attend as a council person, but I think it's always nice to get refreshers if you have attended in the past, and if you're new, it can give you some insight on zoning and planning, and the township would definitely be open to covering costs and whatever that are associated with your attendance. So I just want to remind everybody about that email if you could take a look at it.
And it is something that the township will pay for. You just have to let me know and we'll get it set up, so you don't have to put any money up front or anything like that.
Is it, and is that the one that's a series?
Yeah, it's
So
a 3-part
is
series.
it mandatory to attend all three?
I think it said it's mandatory to attend all 3 to get the certificate at the end, so some people who may need their credits need that certificate.
Okay.
They have to go, but I mean, if you have to miss one, it's,
I think we would like you to attend as many
Yeah.
as you can, but I mean, not gonna like not pay for your
Yeah.
sessions if you can't make one of the 3 or something like that.
Okay.
and they provide lunch, I saw.
Yeah,
Lunch, all right.
that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any other items from the public? Then we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
I'll
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? So I guess I get to do this.
Well done. No, it's a different Jeffrey show.
And turn off your microphones.
And he's in Ida-Redding anyway, but yes.
Does he live here? And then
Right, and then you're like,
go
oh
to
boy.
Reading?
You were in the Algonquin?
Yeah, I did that trial.
The crazy stuff.